Do not adjust your digital device. What you are about to see and hear may shock and appall you. Join our hosts as they encounter countless thrills, spills, chills, and hilarity as they explore the very weirdest in pop culture. The following media is so strange, so beyond the scope of what is normal, it will make you ask the question, why does this exist? Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Why Does This Exist? I'm Chris.
And I'm Rob.
And today we are going to be talking about a very heartfelt movie, something that makes everybody feel a little bit special on the inside. It's actually a really fun movie. It's good for the whole family, so we probably won't really curse a lot on this episode. Maybe I can't promise you that we won't curse at all. So this might be the only one that you can actually listen to with your kids. Maybe. We are going to be in the spirit of winter and the Winter Olympics, which won't happen for a couple more years. But hey, we're going to be talking about an interesting Disney movie. We're going to be talking about Cool Runnings, which is probably one of my favorite older live action Disney movies, if not my favorite. I actually recently watched The Mighty Ducks for the first time in a long time, and it does not really hold up as well. It's not that good. But Cool Runnings, I think, does. I actually really like it, and it's based on a true story of the first Jamaican bobsled team, and I believe
very loosely based.
Very, very loosely based. Before we get into that, we're gonna just run our gamut of things. We are Why Does This Exist? We are a podcast that talks about the very weirdest in pop culture, whether it's a strange TV show, a movie you may or may not have ever heard of, a video game of some kind, some strange musical genre or an artist or whatever it may be. Even weird board games or just things like that. Whatever it is, we try to cover it to the best of our abilities, and sometimes we go off the rails and we really hit them where it hurts, and we just say really ridiculous things, just as we did in the previous episode on Magic the Gathering and all of the bad decisions that the company that makes the game does and has done and probably will continue to do. There's been more crazy things since then that have happened within a week, including spoiling like 5 new sets or something like that. Really, 3 sets that are going to be overpriced and overpowered and things that I just want nothing to do with now. That is another story for another day.
Yeah.
If we're here, if this strange thing occurs, we will try to cover it, and you can support us by a number of ways. You can just simply listen to the show. That's the easiest way to do it. Send us over to your friends, families, enemies, and whoever you think should listen to this podcast. You can send it over to them, and they can listen to it wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is that you may be, that you like to listen to podcasts. You can find us there. You can also find us on YouTube, and you could subscribe to our channel and just share some love in the comments, or you could even just downvote us or upvote us, whatever you want to do. Just engage with everything in some way, shape, or form. I don't know when we're going to really start to get all the YouTube stuff on track. It's just we have so much in the back and we just don't have any assistance because we have regular jobs and families and everything. So bear with me. We'll get to a steady YouTube pace eventually again, but I just don't know when that's going to be. We're just very, very busy.
Jag-offs.
Yes, we are. We also have our website, whydoesthisexistshow.com, or it's whydoesthisexistpod.com. You can email us at whydoesthisexistshow@gmail.com. That website is still here for a little while. We're going to be moving everything over to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/whydoesthisexist. We will continue to operate our articles and everything like that from there. And you can give us as little as $1, or you can give us as much as you like. Patreon.com/whydoesthisexist. And when you do that, you get access to our Discord server. You can hang out with us, and you can trash talk us, and you can do whatever it is that you want to do. And you can even take a look at what our schedule is going to be, so you'll know exactly what we're going to be doing before we do it. It's a cool little thing. Just assume that it's then, maybe we'll even let you be on an episode if you've got something smart, if you've got something fun to say, or we might even take some requests from you. It's up to you. You want to be one of the cool kids, join the Discord server. Join the Discord server with Patreon. Patreon.com/whydoesthisexist. And with that said, you are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge from a ragtag group of rogues. So let's get on with the goddamn show. Tell the good people what this is and what's going on with Cool Runnings.
So
what is so cool about this running?
Well, Cool Runnings is a movie, a Disney movie based off of the true story of the Jamaican bobsled team. And for those who don't know, Jamaica is a tropical country, and so only ever competed in the Summer Olympics, specifically boxing, sprinting, or running in general, track and field, and cycling. So basically, the movie starts off with a few of these Jamaicans that are trying to qualify for the 100-meter dash, and one of them trips and knocks over the other two, and they end up not qualifying, obviously, because they didn't finish the race. So the main guy, whose name is Darius, he pleads to try to get back in and, for a second heat, but like the guy who's like the commissioner's like, no, sorry. Like, it was a fair race. I feel bad for you that you tripped, but you could just try again next time. So not willing to take no for an answer, he figures out that the disgraced American bobsledder named Irv Blitzer, was played by John Candy in his last role that was released while he was alive.
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah. So he's
I gotta watch Spaceballs again.
Yeah, it's a great movie. I mean, John Candy is great.
In just about all of his roles, he's pretty damn good.
Yeah, this is like classic John Candy, like very much like just like the wisecracking everyman kind of role.
One of the 3 actors that was set to play Fatty Arbuckle in a biopic that died.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
Wasn't Chris Farley one of the other ones too?
Yes, that's where we uncovered this when we were doing our Beverly Hills Ninja episode.
Yes.
To kick off the new year.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, Beverly Hills Ninja was Chris Farley's last movie released during his lifetime. So this is the second time we're doing a Chubby Comics last movie released during their lifetime.
Yes. I'm sensing a pattern here.
Yeah. Because to Wagons East and Canadian Bacon were both released after he had passed away. John Candy.
Canadian Bacon's good too.
Canadian Bacon is hilarious. It's friggin' Michael Moore's only good movie in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I digress.
I had to look that up several times to realize that Michael Moore actually did something of merit.
Yeah. So anyway, basically Darius tracks down Irv and is like, hey, I want to be in the Olympics, and we can't now try again for another 4 years for running, so we want to try to be bobsledders. And basically, like Irv is like, you're in Jamaica, are you like smoking crack or something? Like, not exactly those words, but like, no one really believes in them, because again, this is like Jamaica's never competed in the Winter Olympics, and so now they want to try to be bobsledders
for very obvious reasons, and none of them really know what a bobsled is.
Right.
They just know it's a sport in the Winter Olympics. We can make it to the Winter Olympics.
And obviously they can't train on a real bobsled because they live in a tropical climate where they've never seen snow before. So they have to like use like this cart with wheels on it that looks like a sled, except it's got wheels instead of
Right. Well,
like
they have
grip blades.
they have the Jamaican pushcart races, which the
Yes.
pushcart derbies. That's a real thing.
Yes, it
But
is.
pushcart is basically it's like it's basically bobsledding, but your bobsled has wheels on it. It's like it's like go kart with like yeah, it's basically like a go kart like downhill slalom, and
Yes.
it's pretty dangerous.
It's a popular sporting. I'll just quote Wikipedia here. Let me pull a card out of the CEO of Wizards book real quick. Pushcart Derby is a popular sporting event held every August in Jamaica, where homemade carts are used for street vending to transport items, or as a racing cart take place in races like American soapbox races. There you go. So it's just like a downhill race. So the Doris like recruits his friend Sank, whose name I just realized is Sanka Coffee. Now, again, for those who don't know, Sanka is friggin' a brand of like instant coffee. So I didn't realize
Is
this
it
while
really?
watching.
His
Yes,
whole
it
name
is.
is Sanka Coffee,
His name is Sanka Coffee.
and Sanka is a real coffee company. I never
Yes.
heard of this.
Yeah, it's like a really crappy like instant decaf coffee.
Oh, all
That
right. Well, that was going to be my next question. Is it any good?
no.
So is this like a 3-star motel coffee,
Yeah,
basically?
basically, yeah.
Oh boy, yeah, all
It's
right.
the Bizarro coffee shop's coffee.
Oh god, it's probably very cheap then.
Um,
Anyway, well, Sanka has his good luck charm, which is the egg, which he believes it's good luck because it never breaks. So you have to kiss the egg.
yeah, he kisses the egg.
He kisses the egg constantly. It doesn't break, but yes, he carries the egg everywhere. That's got to be a really rotten egg.
Yeah,
They don't determine how long he's had this egg, or if he just gets a new egg every like couple of weeks or anything. He just always has the egg,
maybe
and it
I
never
thought it looked like it
breaks.
was made of stone. Like it's a stone egg.
I think it's a plastic egg.
Oh,
Well,
well,
I don't know if his egg is plastic, but I know that
I thought his egg was made of stone.
I know the egg prop that they used was
Well,
plastic. I don't know. His
obviously.
egg, it might be a stone egg. I don't know.
Oh well, whatever. It's an egg. It's
It's
his
an
good luck
egg.
charm.
That's his thing.
Sanka is also like kind of like the source of comic relief somewhat in the group because he's kind of like a doofus. He reminds me a lot of Kel from Keenan and Kel.
I could see some of that.
He's also like apparently the pushcart derby champion, despite the fact that he crashes during the race and like breaks through the friggin' like literally, and there's a child with him. He almost like murders a child because he's like friggin' crashes his cart through a shed and like. And then we hear his like, you know, it's kind of like a one-liner that's repeated throughout the whole movie where whenever he crashes or gets hurt, Doris goes, "Sanka, you dead?" And then Sanka's like, "Yeah, man." Which it's like my favorite like recurring joke throughout the movie. So anyway, they the two of them team up, and then they also recruit Junior Bevel, who is the guy that like tripped them up while they were running, and Yul Brenner, who's kind of like this douchey guy who's like he's kind of like the bully character, but ends up joining them anyway because he wants to also go to the Olympics. So they get their team together and then they start training, and of course, Irv is like it's like the typical like training montage where they're like absolutely god awful in the beginning, and then like you could kind of slowly see them progress. They go from like barely being able to jump in the cart to like actually like kind of making like a qualified run. And I think Irv comments like for like a qualified start, they need to like all be inside the cart rolling down the hill in like 5.1 seconds or something like that.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah, so they start out going like it takes them like 13 seconds or 20 seconds because they keep tripping and jumbling around and stuff. And so interestingly enough, Sanka is not the driver of the cart. Doris ends up being the driver because Irv kind of scares Sanka. He's like, because Sanka's like, well, I'm driving obviously because I drive the push cart, so I'm like obviously the guy who's going to steer the bobsled. And Irv is like, well, if you're gonna steer the bobsled, just so you know, you have like everybody's lives in your hand. You have to make these like split-second decisions and like not crash. And Saga's like, yeah, okay, I'm just gonna jump in the back and not be not be the driver. So Doris ends up being the driver because he's kind of like the leader of the team, basically.
Yep.
So anyway, they finally like, they get better and better and finally decide to go. So they have to raise money, obviously, too, because
Right.
they need the money to travel to Calgary, which is where the Winter Olympics, the 1988 Winter Olympics, were being held.
Well, and they also need the registration fees and everything.
Yeah.
And to pay whatever they need to pay to get like a real custom bobsled made
Right.
for the Olympics.
Right. So they end up trying to raise the money and like fail miserably at it. Like I think Sanka ends up like trying to beg on like for basically like is on the street like begging for money and like trying to like sing and know like people pay him just to shut up.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
so
he
they end
earns
up
a whole dollar.
yeah. But then we learn that Junior is like the son of like the richest man on the island, pretty much. And is basically like, oh yeah, here's $20,000. Like, and
Yeah.
there's
Like
a whole like
he sells his car and he feels bad about everything.
yeah,
And like they're constantly going like they're like bankers and like investors and like they just get laughed out of the building because they're
yeah,
like, what
pretty
is he like? We don't even know what a bobsled is.
yeah,
And but yeah, Junior ends up just doing this whole thing with his where he just tells his dad he sold it. He like lent his car to somebody
yeah,
to like go get a job at like a big place in America or something, and he was like, oh, okay, great, and like he just sold the car to like make the thing happen. So like they
yeah.
put him on the team.
He's also like there's a whole side plot where Junior is basically like it's like the classic like his parents want to push him into being like a businessman and like, oh, give up on your dream of being in the Olympics because you should be going to work and like earning money. And you know it's like it's very like it's
There's
a very stereotypical movie. It's not like
Yeah,
they're not doing anything.
there's a lot of classic tropes that occur, and
Yes.
it's very much like we said, it's a Disney family movie in the '90s. It followed the same formula that just every like live action like family movie had in the '90s anyway, and '80s and
Especially
so
like
forth.
Disney sports movies are all very similar.
Oh yeah,
Um
I mean it all goes back to the hero's journey, which Holtzboyer turned us on to.
of
So
course.
it does follow those templates.
Yes. It does indeed. Um and you could say that sports and the Olympics are like the modern like hero. I mean, basically the original Olympic Games in Greece were like all the heroes of Greece came to like compete against each other, so it's like basically the same thing. So
Yeah, it was a who's the most heroic competition.
yeah, basically. So anyway, they finally they raise the money thanks to Junior, and they are off to Calgary. And of course, like, the Jamaicans are all like, oh, it's probably not going to be that cold. And then they get to Calgary and realize that they've never actually experienced cold before in their lives and are like absolutely frozen. So end up like, I think Sanka ends up taking every piece of clothing he has brought with him out of his bag and wearing it at once, basically. And, so like they get there and we actually kind of get a little bit of Irving, like his backstory a little bit because his former teammates are there. And like we know that he's like a disgraced bobsled guy, but they really never kind of let on to why he was disgraced until we get there and we see his former teammates that are basically like coaches now. And we kind of learn that Irving like basically cheated in like one of the previous Olympics, and so he was like kind of like kicked out of the sport and disgraced completely.
Yeah, like he loaded up the added weight to the cart so that way they'd have an advantage.
Yeah, so
But you actually can do that in bobsledding. You can't load it up to like a ridiculous amount, obviously, but you can add some weight to the bobsled.
I'm sure it's part like kind of like
Legally.
a safety thing too, because it needs to have a lower center of gravity so it doesn't tip over or fly off the friggin' track. So
Right. I mean, and actually making it lighter is illegal, is an illegal offense.
Yeah.
So it turns out that the movie like switched that around for a plot device.
Yes. Well, like we said before, it's only very loosely based on the Jamaican bobsled team.
Yes, in fact, there's only really two things that are true about anything that happens in the movie Cool Runnings, which is one, the bobsled that the Jamaican bobsled team exists, and two is the what it's known for is that they crash at the end of the last turn,
Yeah.
and that and the and like the crowd gets behind them anyway, and like it's still like a great moment for the for the Jamaican bobsled team, even though they don't win,
Yeah.
because like there's like a whole unifying moment from the crash that turns it from tragedy to triumph.
Yeah, it was very much like the underdog story, the classic this is the first time Jamaica has ever competed, and like, obviously they've never it's a warm climate, so there's no way they could even train really in their own home place. So it's like very much like that, like, David and Goliath, like kind of like this like absolute underdog coming through. And even though they lost, it was kind of like a heroic victory because like, they're determined to finish their race. So they carry the bobsled across the finish line,
Right.
and like, it's supposed to be like an allegory, going back to the hero's journey, the allegory of like the heroic losses in history, like the Spartans at Thermopylae and that kind of thing. Like, yeah, they did
Mhm.
lose, but they did it in such a way that it was like they were really the kind of the winners. Like they're remembered throughout history. So that was kind of the Jamaican bobsled team, even if it was kind of like they were a little bit of a joke. They kind of they kind of won over the crowd in the end because of like they, the fact that they were so determined and they were the underdog.
Right.
Um, and to
But
this day, they still have a bobsled team. So
yeah, but like
um,
basically the to continue the plot, basically they go to Jamaica. I mean, they go to Canada. They realize they've never experienced cold and all that, and then they qualify. They end up qualifying, and and they end up qualifying for the Olympics. They do a
mhm,
pretty decent thing. They do pretty well. Surprise, and it's to the shock of everyone there, of course.
yeah,
And then of course, we wouldn't this wouldn't be a Disney movie if there wasn't just a sudden random like thing where we're establishing the villains, and the villains being the Olympic board basically, or the Olympic Council,
yeah,
and the and Coach Blitzer's rival teams
yeah.
now,
Well, the East German
the
team, of
East
course.
German team, because
Of course, it was the East
of
German team
course, yeah,
because
why wouldn't
communism
they?
is evil.
Yeah, why wouldn't they pick that? So they try to pull a bunch of shenanigans to kick the Jamaican team out. I mean, it's loosely like it's alluded to, but not admitted that it's due to racism. But they like kind of leave it open as to whether or not it's race related, or because it's Blitzer's team and they just have the vendetta with him.
Yeah,
Which I feel like if anything like this really did happen in real life, like it would be like out as a big scandal, or like this wouldn't even be able to happen, because I feel like you would be banned from the sport
yeah,
if you if you cheated in the Olympics. I'm pretty sure you get banned from the sport.
yeah. I don't think you could be like a coach if you're banned from the sport.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't do that. I mean, unless Bill Belichick decided to be an Olympics coach, then they let him right in. He
Well,
cheats all the time.
Deflate Gate, that was the whole thing. He was allowed to keep playing, so
Yeah, well, listen, it's the Patriots. He cheats all the time.
yeah.
It's also Boston. What can you do?
So I want to also point out that the first Jamaican bobsled team was actually like coached by an American
Yes,
Howard Seiler, who was an Olympic bobsled in the United States, but he
yes,
wasn't a
but
cheater.
no, he wasn't a cheater at all. In fact, it like the story, like we said, is pretty bogus. Of what like the movie story is pretty
Yeah.
bogus as to what actually happened in the real in the real 1988 Olympics.
Yeah, and Hollywood has a tendency of like picking out historical characters and making them way worse than they really were, just for drama's sake. So like, this is a good example. The fact that like Irv is like a cheater, even though the real guy was not, and like then you have like movies like The Patriot, where like like the main like the British guy that's played by Jason Isaacs or whatever is like this complete awful person that like literally commits war crimes on a daily basis, and like the real guy that he's based on was not nearly that at all, and he's actually considered like a hero in England. So it's like Hollywood just like does that. They'll just take someone and like make them like awful for no reason at all, except for like to add drama to the friggin' movie or something.
Right. Everything is done for the sake of a plot device, and it makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
Like in this movie, only like we said, only about 1% of the movie is actually true.
Yes. And they have like the tropes, like they have like a bar fight and with the friggin' East German team, and like of course like that's a thing that happens, and this was like the time where like all sports movies were like for some reason like the Russians or the like someone related to the Russians were the bad guy, and I guess it's because it was like the end of the Cold War. So, but you had that like Rocky IV where it was like Ivan Drago was was like a Russian, and was it Miracle, which was about the the American ice hockey team that beat the Soviet ice hockey team
Mm-hmm.
at the Winter Olympics. So like it was just like a trope at that time to have like Russians or East Germans as bad guys.
I mean, just any Eastern European has pretty much
Yeah,
always been a bad guy in American cinema
yeah, pretty much.
pretty much since the 70s and like the late 60s. It's always been something like of that nature.
Yeah. And even in like like James Bond movies, like the bad guys were always like Eastern European, basically. So
Pretty much. So I mean that's what you got for you there. I mean what actually did happen was no, there was no racism at all. The the bobsledding community actually was over the moon about the Jamaicans being involved because they were like, "Holy crap, that is so cool.
yes,
We we never thought that you guys even knew what this was. This is so great. Look at how awesome this is. See, we can get people from tropical countries to come and compete in the Winter Olympics. How crazy is that? Look at how cool the Olympics is. Come on in." Like none of that happened, but of course, like we said, plot devices.
yeah.
So,
Well,
you know,
there is one thing that was accurate. The original Jamaican bobsled team did have to ask other teams for help and equipment because they didn't have anything, because they were
that I could
again
see.
from a tropical climate, and that is kind of like in the movie where Irving meets with one of his former teammates. Is like, hey, can you let us borrow a sled, even if it's like a shitty training sled? We just need something that's like competitive, that'll
Mhm.
like allow us to get in and qualify. And so he like is able to get that.
Right.
So that is kind of true to life there. Um. Anyway, Doris kind of like is like trying to copy the Swiss team, and so they're obviously they're training and they're trying to do their qualifications, and like Sanka's eventually like, hey, we can't just like copy the other team. We have to like let's do it like the Jamaican way, or bobsled Jamaican. Like we have to like kind of like do it our own way. We can't just copy somebody else, otherwise we're not going to win. And so they do that, and they actually qualify finally.
Yeah.
But then of course during their final race, that's when they like crash, and they pick up their sled and carry it across the finish line, and of course that like makes everybody cheer for them. Uh, there's like a whole thing where like Junior's father also comes to try to like take him out and say like, oh, you're not going to be competing, and Junior's like, no, I am competing, and just goes and does his thing. And then
Yeah.
Junior, of course, he wins over the father, the typical like
it's
very
very typical
stereotypical.
things.
Yeah.
But like, I'm pretty sure that like honestly, if you're a parent and your kid is competing at the in the Olympics, and you're like, hey, and you go out to like, and you go all the way to the Olympics to try to convince your kid to, who is now considered an Olympic athlete, to not compete in the Olympics. You're an asshole.
Yeah.
Oh, damn it! I said botch. I said that I wasn't gonna curse that much, but like, I think that has to be said. I'm sorry if your kid was listening to this.
Hey,
I'm
this is a
very, very,
family
very
friendly.
sorry. This
We
is a
always curse.
family-friendly show. I'm sorry. I ruined it for everyone. Now some poor kid is going to be laughing, and the parent is going to be in trouble with one of their with the spouse, because they're going to be listening to this too. And then now we're gonna get canceled because someone's gonna say, now my kid knows what that word is, and just not great. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm blowing this one. All right.
Blow.
Let me continue to bomb on here on my show. Let me continue. At least it's my show that I'm bombing on.
Yeah, we're like the Jamaican podcast team. Anyway, so they obviously lose because
Kiss my egg.
Kiss my egg. And but you know, whatever, they win over the crowd, and you know that they, even though they lose, that whatever, they leave as heroes, and then there's an epilogue that says that they return home as heroes, and then they come back to the Olympics 4 years later. And
I don't know if they actually came back to the Olympics 4 years later as the same team. I'm sure the bobsled team still came back, but I don't know if it was the same people.
well, yeah.
But you know,
I mean, in the movie it is, but that doesn't mean like that was real life. Again, because the movie is really only loosely based on the story.
Yeah, they did have the Junior Bevel story is similar to what actually happened in real life. They did have the 4-man bobsled team, and and one person actually got one person actually wasn't able to compete. Like, he got injured, or like something happened, and
Yes.
they almost did get disqualified by lack of a players, but his brother was in attendance, and his brother was just coming as a spectator, and I think the guy's name was Chris Stokes, the real guy who
Yes. Replacement. Yeah, that was the replacement. It was Chris Stokes.
Yeah, who was the replacement. So his brother came in and replaced him. So that's actually true.
Yeah. Except Junior.
Except Junior's just
won.
there instead of just having a guy who's he doesn't get switched out.
It's really only loosely. I mean, they probably did that for like simplicity's sake, because you know, if you try to like, then you have extra characters that like, oh, it's like, why is this guy's brother here all of a sudden? You know, so whatever. That's Hollywood. That's how they make movies. You know.
Yeah, I mean, if they just, I guess the original story didn't seem interesting enough to them, but I think the original story is fine. But what really did happen was, just like we said, two bobsled coaches. They already I think George Finch. So their names was George Finch and William Maloney, and I think George Finch actually already lived in Jamaica, and like they just had a light bulb go off because they were bobsled coaches, and they were like, "Hey, you know, it'd be really great if like bobsledders could just train all year round." And they saw Jamaica being, and they also were thinking, you know, sprinters would probably be like the best bobsledders because like they already have to do something similar, like just as everyday runners. They're already going at impeccable speeds. They'd be great just to get the advantage on a push, just to get the head start. So they'd be really good with the acceleration, and then on top of that, they're also very thin, so they will be very light, and they'd really just be able to like get in there as quickly as possible. So they thought so they figured it'd be a good idea. So they were like, well, we got to go to Jamaica to get the sprinters then, because they got the best sprinters in the world.
Yeah.
And so they were living in there, and the issue was that they could not get, like, it was like similar to not similar, but just like in Cool Runnings, it is hard for them to find the first Jamaican bobsled team, because either people didn't know what bobsledders were, or they approached the best sprinters, and they all were like, no, if I'm going to compete in the Olympics, I'm going to do it for track and field. I'm not going to do this other thing. You're crazy. So they had to go to the military, and they got the bobsledders there from the Jamaican military, which is I thought it was a more interesting story.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. Also, this went through a bunch of casting changes too and script rewrites, but other things that were changed was really, I mean, like most of it really.
Yeah. I mean, it was very, very, very loosely based on the actual story,
Yep.
and apparently Pat Brown, who's one of the coaches, later said that they actually never experienced any of the animosity that's depicted in the movie from the other bobsled teams.
No, not at all. They were accepted right away by like
Yes.
anybody in the Olympics because,
Yeah.
well, they were all like, "Good, it's so cool that you're here," like we said before.
Well, and that's the spirit of the Olympics. We always see these sports movies where the other team are assholes, but like really the spirit of the Olympics is
There's
like
that word again.
the world's
Oh, I guess since I did it now.
Yeah. You set a bad example.
I did set a bad example. I made a bad choice. I'm very sorry.
You put the bar too low.
I did set the bar too low.
But like, the spirit of the Olympics has always been like that. Then yeah, it's a competition, but like it's really just a display of like every nation's best and brightest athletes. It's not supposed to be like, oh, and the governments of the world try to turn it into like, oh, well, we're better because we have better swimmers than and that. But like really what it boils down to, the Olympics has always been about bringing every nation together to like really show us like, oh, these are the best and brightest that we have like in the world. It's not like, oh, okay, one nation's better than the other. It's like everybody, this is like what our best athletes are.
Right. It's the only form of unification that we have on this earth where where everybody gets together and and everybody's cool with each other and everybody is okay.
Yeah.
It's the one time where we set our differences aside for sports. Of course it's freaking sports.
Yeah.
But we do, and like wars kind of cease at that point. Wars don't really there's not like a whole lot of conflict. A lot of tensions go down around the Olympics. And then, of course, they start back up right after it's over. But
yeah, or sometimes during, because everyone wants to friggin' have a dick measuring contest during these.
Sometimes we
things,
do.
So,
But usually it's a calm time for the world for just a brief couple of weeks, and then it's back to business. But at least we get like that modicum. So it's like it's very weird because it's a peek inside of what it would look like if we just had world peace and we all just did get along.
Yeah.
And then they just and everyone, it's like everybody just hangs out and they're like, oh, it's really great. It's really nice that we're not fighting each other for a change. And then then the bell goes and then everybody like ends their way and they extinguish the flame of decency. I don't know what it's really called, but I'd say it's the flame of decency. And then everyone's like, all right, I'm gonna go fight you again. I'll see you on Monday, basically.
Yeah.
But the movie, but Cool Runnings underwent a lot of different changes. Like this originally was going to be a documentary, and they didn't really care for the idea. Like basically, once the Disney executives got into it, they didn't really like the idea of it enough. And like the script, like it went through like a ton of like script changes and lead changes and whatever it was, just like executive changes and all that stuff. Like there was just a lot of turnover in the beginning. So it went from the documentary that it was going to be to the movie that it became. And originally it was going to be called Blue Maga, which I don't even know what that means. Not to be confused with Umaga, rest in peace. I don't really it's just Blue Maga. Yeah, that would have worked. So it was going to be a serious, and then it was going to be a serious sports drama film, and then that didn't really work, and then it became a comedy eventually to what we now have, and also the casting decisions. It it took a long time to get anybody because John Candy was the only person that they wanted for a role that actually accepted. Like John Candy read the script, he really enjoyed it, and he said, "Yeah, I'll do it. This is great, cool." They wanted to get Denzel Washington. They wanted to get Martin Lawrence, who was starting to get to the top of his game at this point,
Yep.
or at least starting to become a household name.
Yeah.
Probably the best comedian in the world at the time.
Yeah.
And they were, like I said, they were going to get Denzel also, so it would have been really great.
That would have been
And
great.
I don't know who else they would have gotten, but they wanted to get a lot of like, you know, big names that were up and coming, as well as just like top comedians or whatever. And then they had tried to get Cuba Gooding Jr. for the next batch, Jeffrey Wright and Eric LaSalle, and they were going to get, and they tried to get them. They passed on it too, and then they had to do an open audition, and just doing an open casting call, they finally got the cast that they got.
Yeah.
Which I think I really like all of them in
They were
the
good,
roles.
yeah.
So I think they got the best people that they could have gotten, and honestly,
They were more no-name actors. They weren't as well known, but they filled the roles that they took quite
yeah,
well,
yeah,
So,
and they almost became iconic in their own right because people love this movie. It's one of
yeah.
my friend's favorite movies, actually, and well, it's his favorite movie. I really like this. Just in general, as a family movie, this is one of my favorite family movies, probably.
Yeah, I've never actually seen this movie before. I hadn't even really heard of it. I mean, obviously I knew about the Jamaican bobsled team, but I didn't knew there was this movie based off of it.
Yeah,
And
it's really cool.
yeah,
It's a really
it's not
cool one.
it's not a movie that I would normally watch. Like I'm not like a huge fan of sports movies, and like unless it's like more of a sports comedy movie like Happy Gilmore or something.
Hmm.
But I liked it. It wasn't bad. Again, I wasn't like head over heels for it, but it had its moments. John Candy, obviously you can't be beat. He's like, classic in this.
Hmm.
And a lot of it's just, it's not bad. It's there's some good jokes. I laughed a couple times, so
Yeah.
it wasn't terrible.
John Candy even got John Candy even took a pay cut to do the movie
Yeah.
because he just really was interested. It's been There have been claims that Disney wanted Kurt Russell to be Coach Blitzer, but
Oh, that would have been interesting.
it hasn't been like it hasn't been proven or disproven. But
Yeah.
I think he would have been good in that too. It would have
Yeah.
been a very different movie.
Oh,
If
yeah.
they had gotten Kurt Russell
Yeah.
and Martin Lawrence and Denzel Washington, I think it would have probably been a little bit more of a drama
Yeah, it would have been way
than
more
a
serious.
comedy.
Yeah.
But I think it would have been interesting to see that. But I really like the movie that we have.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
I think
it
that's
works as
probably
a
the
comedy.
best turnout. I like it. I really enjoy it as a comedy.
And at the box office and critically, it actually did very well.
Yes, and there were a few changes to the script too because they originally thought like the unknown cast that are the main cast members, they thought that like they were afraid that they were going to be portrayed negatively.
Mhm.
And so did the Jamaican bobsled team. They were all like when they found out that Disney was making a movie based on the actual event, they were like, okay, well, what are they going to do? Are they going to are they going to portray us negatively? Are they going to make us look like a bunch of potheads? Like what? Like I hope they don't do that because like the culture of Jamaica is way more than that. That's just like a tiny thing that happens here. Like please don't do that. And there was actually a joke that the cast members protested to get removed from the film, which was they were going to be making a snowman in Canada, and one of them was going to put a carrot where a joint would be,
Uh-huh.
so it was going to look like the snowman was smoking a joint.
Oh, that would have been hilarious, but
Yeah,
not
it would have been
appropriate for
very
a Disney movie.
yes, it would have been very funny, but they were like, no, because this is all that people are going to remember is this
Of
one
course.
gag, and then the whole movie is going to just like look stupid.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to make us all look bad if you leave this in, so you got to yank it out, which I think was the right move. But it would have been really funny to see, especially now that joke would have aged much better. But I
Well,
totally understand.
it was a different time.
It
Weed
was a
was
very
like
different
way
time.
way less looked upon favorably back in those days. So
Yeah, I mean, it was like, I mean, people were still going to jail for it.
yes,
Like, people are still getting prison sentences for like small amounts of it
yeah,
at the time. So yeah, I'm glad that that's not in there.
yeah.
But it would have been funny to see.
Oh, allegedly Eddie Murphy was also offered to a role in the movie.
Yes,
But
that's right.
would have been really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, they would have probably had to pay him like that would have been a huge budget then.
Oh yeah.
Like, I can't
So
imagine how much they would have spent on this.
yeah, I mean, well, yeah, they probably didn't have the budget for it. But
No, probably not. But anyways, it wound up in Disney's hands, and it actually was received pretty well critically and in the box office. It debuted at number 3 that week,
yeah,
so good for them. It earned about yeah it earned 154,856,263 dollars worldwide at the time, which I don't know what that would be adjusted for inflation, but it did well. I don't know what the budget was, but it doesn't matter. They did well. Also, Hans Zimmer wrote the music for this. That was something that surprised me because when I was watching it yesterday, I was just watching the opening credits, and then it just said music by Hans Zimmer, and I was like, really? This guy? They have this guy on this? Cool. So a lot of interesting things about this, but also the crash that did happen. It to the bobsled. They couldn't recreate that safely when they
mhm,
were filming, so they just used the actual footage from like just from the news channels,
yeah,
and they just edited it to fit in with to fit in with what they were doing. So they took real footage, and then they just kind of like did a couple of little things just to make it work. But they also didn't carry they
no,
didn't carry the bobsled at the end. They just like pushed it, and it was fine.
yeah.
But yeah,
All
it's a scary moment.
the
In
crash
the
is also
movie, sorry, you
it,
say it?
I was gonna say it's also depicted differently in the movie. It's caused
Yes,
by
that's what I was getting to.
yeah, mechanical failure, whereas in real life it was like actually like operator error.
Yeah, but still, really,
Yeah.
just well done.
I
And
think they
I
were trying to
and
make it obviously more like, for the movie, they want to make the characters more sympathetic and, not make it
yeah,
so it was them that was their fault that they kind of failed. It was, an
right,
accident.
because there's various points in the movie where they bring up a specific turn
Mhm.
on the bobsled course that just is very tricky and a little bit more of a tight turn than usual.
Mhm.
So they allude to that several times as like a foreshadowing of the crash, and then they crash on that turn, so they make it seem more like it's just the track design.
Yeah.
But in reality, it was a driver, and that's okay. It happens all the time. Thankfully, everybody was okay.
Yep.
But yeah, Cool Runnings. About 1% of the movie is actually real, and it's just a really fun movie.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not
If
bad.
you ever get a chance to see it, it's on Disney Plus. You could just watch it whenever you want, and it's just really fun. They did also have a two-man sled competition that the movie just ignores completely.
Yeah.
So there's the two-man sled and there's the four-man sled, and there's separate competitions for bobsledding. And the Jamaicans were also not the only team from the Caribbean or Central American. They had other people from the Virgin Islands as well as the and like what do you call it? The Netherlands Antilles, which I don't really know where that is, but it's also in the Caribbean somewhere.
Yeah.
And so like they make it seem like the Jamaican team is like the only team from from that region, which also not true. But they ignore several things. But again, like we said, there's a lot of Hollywood that went into this, and about 99% of Hollywood went into this.
Mm-hmm.
But they still made a good movie. It's still a great story,
Yeah.
and you should see this movie. Just
Yeah.
hang out with your kids, hang out with your family, or just sit on the couch when you got nothing to do and just put this on and just turn your brain off a little bit. And it's just got really good storytelling in the movie, and it makes you like the characters are written well, and you can relate to all of them in several different ways.
Mm-hmm.
They wrote every character with a decent amount of layers, and I
Yeah.
really appreciated that.
Yeah. Everyone kind of has like a nice development arc over the course of the story.
Yes.
So
Especially our boy Senka, who ends up
yeah.
becoming like a really like he goes from being just like kind of a guy who's a little bit more aloof, just kind of taking life as it happens to him, and doesn't really have any plans to like becoming a really to becoming like a real leader and like a tougher guy, and just like really like getting his head on straight in the movie
Mm-hmm.
a little bit later. So every character grows. Junior stands up to his parents and is like, "No, this is my dream. I'm gonna do it, and I'm right here. So I'm like, there's nothing that's gonna stop me, Dad. Like you
Yeah.
followed your dream. I'm gonna now it's time for me to follow mine." You get the military guy who you find out like who it turns out that well he's more of like a soft spoken guy, and he's actually got a lot more going on, and he's really not all that confident as he seems, and a lot of the times he's just kind of compensating, and he is like a good guy, and he ends up respecting Junior at the end and everybody, and he ends up being okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you've got the main fellow. Oh God, what's his name again? I'm sorry.
Doris.
Yes, Derice. That's the guy's name.
Yeah.
He ends up having a lot of transformational growth from being unsure of himself and like just not really knowing who he's gonna be, or just a little like just kind of down on his luck, and just like, oh, I'm gonna try to be positive, but I don't know, to just being a really confident guy, and being a true leader as well. And you even see John Candy's character, you even see Blitzer like end up going from a guy who's just sulking, just wallowing over over his misery of something that happened all these years ago, to finally letting it go, being at peace with himself, and just moving forward and just going on to the next thing and redeeming himself. So it comes full circle with this movie, and I think that's also what helps make it a really great what helps turn it into a really great film.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that about wraps this one up. In the
Yeah.
books, there's not really I don't think there's really too much else to get into this one. I mean, really, we see all the we I think we've said all that we need to say. The movie is a fun movie. It's good to watch. Just just double check the facts if you want to check for historical accuracy, because you're not really going to find that much with this movie. But it's still a good movie.
Yeah.
So that's the story of Cool Runnings, and I think it would be fitting. They have a very specific chant in the film that that everybody knows to this day, and it's just fun to say. I say it to some people sometimes, and that like when I'll call somebody up on the phone, we'll like do it. Like my friend, who this is his favorite movie, I'll call him up, and sometimes we'll end the call with it. So I think it'd be really great if we can just end the podcast with this. But before we do that, once again thank you all for listening to our show, listening to the podcast, tuning in. and just having a lot of fun with us, just being ridiculous human beings at points in time. And we're sorry if we got you into a fight with your spouse because we cursed a couple times. Because your kid heard everything. We didn't mean to, but we did it anyway, and well, oops a daisy. Anyway, this has been Why Does This Exist? You have been wonderful people. I have been Chris.
And I've been Rob.
And remember, question everything. All right, let's do it. 1, 2, 3. Feel the rhythm. Feel the rhyme. Get on up.
It's
bobsled time. Cool running.